Okay, good morning everybody. I'm not sure who came to the Museums Alaska session that Norm and I did, and if you did, I apologize. You've seen some of these slides and the discussion before. For those of you that haven't, what I did is I basically took the LED portion of the sustainability session and used it for this. So I'm just going to briefly talk about what the Heritage Center has done with our lighting and the LED switch over from halogen. Within the past couple years, the Heritage Center did the following. We installed LED lighting in the Hall of Cultures and within the clothing case, and the wall display cases and the echo display case in the lobby. In addition to the lighting within the clothing case, the wall cases and the echo display cases are all on timers that turn on at opening and turn off at closing, so there's no mistaking that the lighting is left on overnight. Prior to 2009, we had some halogen bulbs that were used. Well, actually, everything was halogen bulbs, especially in the Hall of Cultures. Well, these bulbs are more efficient than normal incandescent bulbs. They still have problems, and I'm sure many of you have the halogen bulbs and know that they get very hot. Here at the Heritage Center, the bulbs ranged from 75 watts to 1,000 watts, and that's not a misprint. It is 1,000 watts. Were used in our Hall of Culture in our Pepper's Ghosts, which are the fading in and out. We took readings before we did this major shift over, and light levels ranged from 230 lux or 21.4 foot candles to over 400 lux or 37.2 foot candles, and they're even higher in some spots. And obviously this is not acceptable for the protection of the objects that are on display in the Hall of Cultures. So after 2009, we switched everything over to LED lighting. Mainly this was due to having a loan from the Anchorage Museum in our Athabascan case, and we needed to find something that would lower the light levels in the Hall of Cultures. So LED lights were installed. Before this, we noticed major problems occurring in our 4 wall display cases, and a little bit later on, I'll show you some of the wall display cases photographs. But we were noticing that during the removal of the halogen bulbs that were in our display case, wall display cases, that pieces of the wood of the cases were scorched due to the heat of the lighting, and the plastic was actually shattering because of being so brittle from the heat. So what we did is we switched them over to 1 watt LED bulbs. So what we have now are LED bulbs that range from 1 watt to 8 watt. The 1,000 watt halogen bulbs that we had were changed over to 50 watt instead of LED because of the dimming issues. The Pepper's Ghosts have to dim on and off. They don't turn on and off. So we have problems with LEDs, so we just switched to a lower wattage of a halogen. With all of this changeover, Aaron Legan and I figured out that we had roughly 38,500 watts that were being used prior to this switchover. It was changed out and is now currently 2,272 watts, and that's a 94% drop of wattage. So that translates to almost $10,000 in savings a year, which makes that this installation paid for itself the first year. So here's some photographs of the Hall of Cultures now with the LED lighting in it. We now actually have the back wall that the back wall was never really lit up, and now we can actually have traveling exhibits on the back wall. We never had to change out. Oh, actually, I'll go to the next slide. There's a wide variety of LED bulbs that are available on the market, and the Alaska Native Heritage Center is using the following bulbs, which is a PAR 30, a PAR 38, which is in most of the lighting in the holocultures is par 30 or par 38. And then MR16s, which are in the clothing case. No major modifications were needed in the installation of these LED bulbs. The existing light fixtures for the most part could be used. We did have to purchase new fixtures for the inside of the Pepper's Ghosts due to the failing of the ballast in the existing fixtures and the fact that they were still using halogen bulbs because of the fading in and out. We just had to switch out the canisters with new ones. Also, the fixtures in the clothing case were replaced so they could accommodate the size of the LED bulb, and I'll have some pictures so you could see it, what these bulbs look like. There's actually LED lighting that will replace conventional fluorescent bulbs, and as I said up in Fairbanks, don't be afraid to look on the internet. Most bulbs are now made in an LED form. Most bulbs will last approximately 60,000 hours compared to an halogen's 6,000 hours. And this equates to 20 years of life at 8 hours a day, 365 days a year. Of course, there's some bulbs that aren't going to last. They won't last for that full 20 years. But the manufacturing is getting bigger, and we in fact have a bulb that has blown out after 2 years. But with changing out halogen, you're probably changing them out at least once a year because of the usage of them. So I'm going to show you pictures of the bulbs that we use. You can see that there's a par 30, par 38, and an MR16. The MR16 is not a traditional looking MR16, so that's why we had to buy brand new fixtures for those bulbs. So after the summer of 2009, after we did this installation, the light levels ranged from 21 lux, or 1.95 foot candles, to 195 lux, or 18.11 foot candles. And there's some levels, some locations are even less. And the higher levels that we do have are due to sunlight still coming into the exhibit area from the artist studio. And we're hopefully going to take care of that problem with some UV film. So earlier I talked about the wall display cases. These are the halogen bulbs, or the fixtures with the bulbs in them. You can see how bright they are, and I believe they were 50-watt bulbs that were in there. So we were having a lot of heat damage. You can't really see it in this picture, and I can't really get a close-up picture of it, but there is scorching going on of the actual wood of the case because of the heat that's given off by this LED, or by this halogen. So this is now what it looks like, and these are 1 watt each. And you can see it still provides enough light for the objects as well as for people to read the display signs inside. And we think that it's done a pretty good job. We do have people comment, some visitors comment that it's too dark in the Hall of Cultures now. But of, say, the 60,000 people that come through in the summertime, I think this last year we had maybe 4 or 5 people comment that on their comment card that it was too dark. And we also put signs up within the Hall of Cultures explaining to our guests why the lighting is dark like that, and in hopes to educate them, so if they go to any other museum or cultural center and the lighting levels are very similar to ours, they'll understand that the reason why the levels are that way is because of the protection of the objects that are on display. So other than that, that's the end of my little brief presentation, and I know Scott has some things that he wanted to talk about as well. Do you mean does the Hall of Culture have lights besides what's in the case, or Are you talking about the, okay, the Hall of Cultures, they all have lights that are big, no, not big canisters, but canisters that are par 38 canisters, typical floodlight canisters that we use in track lighting throughout the Hall of Cultures, and that's what we use to illuminate into the display cases in the Hall of Cultures. These here are actually wall cases that are built into the wall that are right next to the storage room, and we have 4 of these. That is our recent acquisitions, so we can show off all the new stuff that we're getting in loans or purchases through Rasmussen, and that's what this is for. These are the 1-watt pucks that are inside these. For the rest of the Hall of Cultures, it's the par 30 or par 38 bulbs in typical canisters.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Oops.
I can hear you, Scott.
Oh, sorry. I lost my mic for a second there. So.
Monica, our supplier is ledlight.com, and a lot of people up in Fairbanks were very surprised when I told them this. There's a couple companies out there that I looked at. This is the one that I actually went with, and the reason why is because they have free shipping of orders over $100, and with these bulbs, you easily get over $100. So we were getting free shipping here to Alaska. LaRue, what we use, we have some cases that have two sides, and what we're using is the actual par 30, par 38 canisters to illuminate those. Marnie, what I'll do is I'll type the link here for everybody so that you can see it.
That's great.
Now the canisters. Well, now the canisters we had, the ones that we had to order specific, we ordered from a local electrical company. We use Megawatt here in Anchorage for a lot of our electrical stuff, and they went and did research for us and found the fixtures to put in for the MR16 bulbs. That's what Scott's going to talk about right now.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Can everybody hear me okay? I had trouble miking back on after not being on for a while, so I can see some smiley faces. Okay. So this is something I'm glad that Jerry Clark from the Sheldon Museum is on with us, because she asked this question to the Museum L list a few months back and just said, you know, what about LED lighting, basically? And she got quite a few responses back, which she put together, and she put those together and sent them to me, and I kind of reviewed them and did a little bit of further research. And there are some people out there who, mainly conservators, and actually mainly one voice in particular who is a conservator. He's a friend of mine. I was an intern with him actually for a while. He's at the George O'Keeffe Museum, and he seems to be very very concerned about the issue of yeah, well, we can hear you now, Gary. I hope that your speakers are working too. So anyway, he seems to be very concerned about the issue of changing over LED lighting. And so I researched what his issues were, and I researched what a prominent conservation scientist who deals with environmental issues responded to his concerns. And the slide that you see up now will be a series of slides of what this conservation scientist, his name is Stephen Weintraub, his direct response to what I would say is probably the the strongest voice against using LED. And basically, Dale Cronkite from the George O'Keeffe Museum, he said, not to use them. But there have been many people who are using them. And Steve Weintraub has a sort of a much more metered approach to it. And as you can see from the slide, he says damage calculations predict that the warmer LEDs, the ones that are warmer light based, have lower damage potential than a UV filtered tungsten halogen lamp. So next slide, please. So you can just read the slide. I'm not going to read them off, but basically, light all has a color temperature, and it's based on the scale of Kelvin. We all know that different lights look differently. Fluorescent lights look different than daylight, the key to it is that if you can get the color temperature reading from the manufacturer, then you should be able to get it into this range of 2,700 Kelvin to 4,000 Kelvin, and that should do well for museum lighting. Okay, next slide, please. Daniel's going to switch the slide here in a second. And some of the information that Jerry had, several posters, although it wasn't listed who posted every part of what she had written on there, but some people said that that LED lighting is not appropriate for museum applications. But this gentleman, Steve Weintraub, who posted his information on the AIC website, which is the American Institute for Conservation, he said that especially the better white light LEDs are with a high color rendering index, CRI, are appropriate for museum applications. So I would tend to trust his information, and if anybody would like to see, I have the PDF of his comments. Basically his responding to Dale Cronkite and his concerns. He responds to it point by point. If anybody would like to see that, please just send me an email and I can send that to you. Some of the language is technical, but it's not too technical to understand. Next slide, please. So here he's going into a bit of what the color rendering index means and what it says. Basically, just because something says it has a high color rendering index, if it's a tungsten halogen bulb, it may have poor lighting because a halogen bulb just don't have a lot of blue or cool end of the spectrum. So that may be the last slide. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, okay. So are there any questions on, or if Jerry, if you want to comment in, or is there any questions on the sort of the conservation applicability side of the of using them? And if you have any questions, you can just type them in, as somebody did. So basically what I wanted to just say was that, Scott presented a way of switching over the museum and saving a lot of money, and I just wanted people to know that there are some people who do have concerns about using LED lighting in museums and whether or not it causes more damage at lower light levels than tungsten. And basically, Stephen Weintraub refutes this idea that it's still a matter of an appropriate light level. He did say that the bluer the LED light, the more likely it is to do damage, because the bluer light waves carry more energy. So Monica says, we have LED fiber optics now in one of our galleries, and they've been fabulous. Okay, so they were specific about color. And as far as Marnie's question, Marnie and Jill, so how do you know what CRI or whatnot to choose? And it should be listed on the bulb, or you should be able to get that information. And maybe Scott Neal can mic back on and help out with that question.
I was just going to go and take a look at our bulb, so if somebody else has any other questions, let me go take a look at our box and see if I can get that information.
Well, Part 20, this is to answer Jerry's things. I mean, Part 20, you know, MR16 and Part 20, those are types of fixtures, and I think Scott Neal maybe can comment on this because he's actually done the changeover. But it's just a matter of which ones fit your lighting systems, and I think that they make LED bulbs that fit MR16 and Par 20s, or they make them that fit into their own systems, as Scott showed the little hockey pucks. But when Scott Neal comes back, maybe he could address that issue for Jerry. Are there any other questions that people have about particular?
Okay, well, I checked ours, and it doesn't have a CRI on any of the boxes, so probably the best thing to do is, if you decide to go with ledlight.com, just to ask them what the CRI is for that particular bulb that you're ordering. And as I was telling Scott earlier, the main reason why we did it was because of the loan. Monica wanted the light levels to be lowered, and this was well before anybody had done any testing. I had asked around if there was any particular things that we were supposed to look out for, and nobody at that time had even started looking at the conservation side, and only recently has that really started and started to be published. And so I didn't know about the blue light or anything, and so it just pretty much became a aesthetics. We like the looks of it, so that's why we went with the blue light. It lowered the light level, which made Monica happy because the light levels were reduced significantly for that case. But the reason why we chose the white light instead of the warm white light was just more of a pleasing look to us, and it also brought out, as Scott said, some of the colors in the blue spectrum. We have objects that have a lot of blue paint and red, and it really brought out those colors very vibrant, especially on one of our visors. So that was why we went with that particular color. To answer Jennifer's question, the cost of going over to LED, not including the actual fixtures that we had to replace for the clothing case, the total cost for the LED bulbs was, I believe, about $6,500. And as I said, in the first year, it saved approximately $10,000 in electricity bill for us. And so it paid for itself and more in that first year. yeah, you're investing in it up front, and then depending on how many lights that you have, you're not going to see as significant. Maybe, I don't know. You know, if you're only changing out 1,000 watts and you're putting in 50 watts of bulbs, then there's 950 watt savings, and you can calculate. You can go on the website for your electric company and see what the going rate is, and calculate how much you saved by switching those out, which is what we did when we did our calculation, and saw that we were saving about $10,000 a year, and we paid about $6,500 for that initial startup, basically, of the bulbs. Who did we work with in terms of the purchasing the bulbs, or kind of talking with them about what the technology that's out there? With the technology, we talked with somebody that I knew back at the Smithsonian, who's their lighting person back there, and he suggested LED bulbs or fiber optics. I also spoke with Bob Banghart and asked him, and at that time the State Museum was just starting to look at LED bulbs, I believe. So, and then I went to the megawatt electricians here who we work with at the facility and asked them if they knew anything about it, and one of their people did a lot of research, or went out and did research to find what was out there. And at the time, this was about 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, at that time, the LED bulbs were still in their infant stage, if you want to say that there weren't a lot of companies out there, and it was only within the last year and a half that the companies have really taken off to provide. Like, you can go to Home Depot and Lowe's now and purchase LED bulbs. And going back, Jerry, you asked about PAR 20s. I've not seen PAR 20 LED, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. Probably the best thing to do is maybe to contact ledlight.com, or there's a couple of other companies out there that online that you can purchase LED bulbs from, and just ask them if they know of any PAR 20s, and hopefully they'll be able to answer that question for you. I think Scott is going through the audio setup because his mic dropped again. So does anybody else have any other questions? And if you do have any questions that you think of later, feel free to email me, and I'll do my best to answer them. I'm definitely not an expert. I'm just kind of fly by the seat of my pants sort of thing, and we're trying to see what we can do.